Hey, one last question. I should have stopped it already, but just thinking about government, thinking about what's happening at the moment, hearing you say things tongue in cheek about we're allowed to keep calling it that at the moment. David Seymour is being very loud at the moment about nobody knows what the principles of the treaty are, so we need to throw it to a referendum. As someone who is obviously far more of an expert than I am, or potentially anyone who's watching right now, how would you define the principles of the treaty?
Well, I mean, the principles of there's a set of the principles of the treaty that have been articulated over and over and over again for the better part of 30 plus years. And it doesn't take, any genius or rocket scientist to find out what they are. There's lots of information out there if you want to find it. But I think the reality is that people have not bothered to do that, right, for whatever reason. And I think our education system continues to fail us, and not just at a primary and secondary level, but at a tertiary level, because we continue to produce graduates out of New Zealand universities and tertiary institutions all over the country, none the wiser as to what these principles are. But they're actually easy to find out. And just to very briefly run down for you the 8 key principles that were identified by the Te Paparahi o Te Raki Tribunal in relation to the report that just got released on the weekend, or publicly handed over on the weekend. So there's the principle of tino rangatiratanga, the principle of kāwanatanga. So obviously that's Article 2 and Article 1 that those principles fall out of. The principle of what they call te hauruatanga in te reo Māori, but it's basically the principle of partnership, where the two spheres of power overlap or influence overlap. The partnership approach must be taken. The principle of mutual recognition and respect, the principle of active protection, the principle of mutual benefit and the right to development, and the principle of equity, and finally the principle of redress. So where a breach has been is clear through legislation, policy or action or omission of the Crown, then Ngāpuhi have the right to redress. So, I mean, those are 8 of principles that have been consistently repeated in different ways by different tribunals for a long time, and also by, our own court system going back as far as the late 80s. So, yeah, they're not undefined. And I think the key thing about them, about decision makers not being sure about which principles apply and when, I think the issue really is that the different contexts will require different sets of principles to apply. Yep. So it is for a decision maker to determine in any given context what are the appropriate set of principles that should apply in that particular circumstance. So I don't think making them mandatory in certain circumstances is going to help anybody. I think that's going to make it harder and worse. And I think that the way we have been doing it, where decision makers, when they're faced with an issue and have to weigh up, all of the matters before them that would relate to any particular issue for Māori or for non-Māori in relation to a Māori issue, that it's for them to determine what principles apply, and with a long established sets of principles to draw from. So I hope that helps.
Oh, you probably just saved the country millions of dollars, because we don't need the referendum now, the so-called referendum.
You do not need the referendum. You do not need the referendum.